So welcome. We are at the Appleton Gallery at Shawnee State University today. I'm Charlotte Gordon, the Artistic Director of Southern Ohio Museum, and we are joined today with Juliellen Byrne, our Columbus artist who's showing in both spaces. So the title of the exhibition is Mother Tongue. The museum component is Mother Tongue of Eden, that starts with the basic premise that humans were given this really lovely place to live, and in most religions there is the story of Eden in which humans misbehaved and were given the boot, and so thus began the story of migration. And so while the museum exhibition focuses on the journey and the migration, Mother Tongue Let's Chat, this exhibition at the Appleton, really focuses more on the dialogue that we are having with each other as we are all on these journeys migrating. The journeys can be viewed in a macro sense or a micro sense, but really we all are on a journey. So we have a combination of figures and animals.
Yes. The other thing that happened, as Charlotte pointed out, when we misbehaved and left Eden, we were left on our own, but we were also left on our own with ideas and ethics and rules, because there didn't need to be any in Eden. That was a perfect place. You didn't have any conflict. And so for myself as an artist working in the studio, I think about the migration of not just people, but also ideas and politics, and how those changing ideas change life for everyone, whether you're part of the dialogue or not. And heads symbolize that in a kind of great way. Also, the combination of animal and beast has some obvious movement qualities to it in terms of migration, but it also puts humans in a funny place. And there is a Hebraic quote that says that humans really dangle in the space between the perfection of angels, and they never make a bad choice, and the instincts of animals, whose choices are made by instinct. So we have lots of choices in our behaviors that guide us on all migratory patterns, whether we're leaving home to find a new home, or whether we're in the studio letting ideas that come to us migrate out. You can watch plants migrate and animals migrate, and that's a little more subtle in terms of the way we look at global warming and how it affects the world. We kind of frame it for humans a lot. The stresses of the planet will force human beings. I think Al Gore said by 2030, there'll be 1 billion people on the planet moving. That's an eighth of the planet right now. And along with that goes the movement of plants and animals as well. So Let's Chat is an interesting way, and of Eden is an interesting way to frame where we all lived happily, animals, plants, and humans, and all then together. What happened with ourselves.
Right. Right, and I think too, when we're bringing tours through the exhibition, one really great way to frame these is to look at the characteristics of the dogs or a specific bird, and ask yourself, what are the characteristics of the dog that the human then could either be calling upon or be dealing with, or that is their issue at hand. What the dog has a sensitive nose, and so that nose and sense of smell, accentuated sense of smell, will affect their movements and where they choose to go and where they choose to migrate to. And as humans, do we need to ever rely upon that sense of smell, or a keen sense of hearing that dogs also possess?
Or do we just not get a choice about it, or choose to disregard it? So it's funny how some of the dogs are led and others seem to be sort of victims of circumstance in this little cycle of story. And then I'm thinking about the dog over here and the human that
doesn't want to see where they're going. And I think that we've all been there, and there are decisions made in that state of mind. I want to take the path of least resistance, or I want to take the least painful path, or just tell me what to do. And those are consequences that then we need to live with.
And migration has a very big component that is having other people telling you what you're going to do. And that's
a waiting process.
And a waiting process.
If you talk to people who've gone through that process, there's waiting. There's a lot of waiting and losing control through that waiting process of what your fate will be.
So in the end, I think this show links with all the work I make because of a sense of vulnerability. There's power, but there's also vulnerability. And those are two really interesting things for me to think about as I work. I like that, that tiny bit of, it's not always powerlessness, but it's a kind of place that you have to yield to.
Right.
And
and when
the process
you're
of making work is about yielding often.
Well, yes, it is, to materials and ideas and sometimes weather conditions. But when these two figures are traveling together, they are vulnerable together. That oftentimes one wants to be in charge, but yet they are also vulnerable by, made vulnerable by the other.
Fair, yes, very fair.
So, during the migration process, and that conversations that we have with each other during that migration process and during that journey really impact the direction as well. How kindly that we speak to others, or how welcoming we are to those who are on that journey, who have to continue to journey to get to their final resting place, that they can call home. So I think that the conversations between the figures and between the pieces is a very strong component in this exhibition.
So I was just thinking about what you said and thinking, so the viewer has to bring something to the table. They have to have a willingness to look. And we can say that about migration. You can recognize what's going on with it, or you can just carry on and not look. And that's kind of a choice thing. But it's also a way to think about the art making process and the art viewing process as well. You can either invest a bit of your personal experience in viewing and in deciphering for yourself, or you can not worry about it, move on. And that's both of those are really human things, really human responses.
Part of the human condition, to either choose to ignore, choose to engage.
Yes, and I'm thinking just a little more broadly, you get to confront that when you go to the Southern Ohio Museum and look at the ancient Indian artifacts alongside 20th century work. And there are so many little tiny threads within that object mass that's hanging on the wall in the permanent collection. And they're modern and they speak really loudly to today. It's amazing. That's when objects, I think, really get to leap past time and space boundaries. That's kind of exciting. And that's
right. And the viewer, so when you're viewing these works, and I think that these works are they can make a viewer very uneasy.
Ooh, let's hope.
So there's not a right way or wrong way to view these, as with any art. And we as viewers can only bring our own stories to the conversation. That art really is a conversation between artist and viewer. And it's a conversation that can span centuries, it can span languages, it can span cultures. And it can strike a chord and strike a conversation from an artist through time and space to find a viewer. And we only bring to it our story. So it doesn't make it a right dialogue or a wrong dialogue. It makes it a very specific dialogue that you have with the person who's bringing their own story to the table.